Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive. If you're joining us from the All Sorts podcast on YouTube, well, you've already kind of stepped into this amazing, library of deep dives we've been building. It's pretty awesome. Hit that like button, share this with anyone who you think might be interested, subscribe so you don't miss any new explorations. And hey, the All Sorts podcast is also on X, Instagram, and Threads, so come find us there too.
And today, we are taking a look at a cultural phenomenon. We're diving into the conspiracies that are right at the heart of Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. This is a book and a film that went way beyond just entertainment. It sparked debate and really got people thinking.
Yeah, for sure. Just the movie itself, it made a huge splash. It pulled in, get this, $77 million just domestically on its opening weekend, and worldwide, $224 million. It was a massive hit. It was the biggest opening for Tom Hanks and the director, Ron Howard, up to that point. But it wasn't just, mindless entertainment. This movie's take on religious history, wow, it was so controversial that some countries wouldn't even show it. It got banned in places like Syria, Belarus, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iran. Pretty wild, right? Meanwhile, in Australia, it was rated M for mature, and only one cinema actually refused to screen it.
Those kinds of reactions really tell you something about the nature of the conspiracies that Brown wove into the story.
Right. So if you're just joining us for this specific deep dive, let me kind of set the stage. The story starts in the Deuce, late at night. We meet Robert Langdon, our main character, a Harvard symbologist.
A symbologist.
I know, right? Coolest academic title ever. Basically, he's an expert in symbols, deciphering them and understanding their hidden meanings. Anyway, Langdon has an urgent call to come to the Louvre, and he finds himself in the middle of this bizarre murder scene. The victim, none other than Jacques Saunière, the curator of the Louvre, no less, and the clues left behind. Not your typical crime scene stuff.
Not at all. Langdon gets the call at the Ritz Paris from Lieutenant Jerome Calais. He's told about Saunière's death and is taken immediately to the Louvre. Once he gets there, under the bright forensic lights, he can't deny just how strange the scene really is.
Absolutely. Next to Saunière's body, they find these symbols and a message. But here's the thing. They're written in this glowing, luminescent ink. Talk about creepy. There's a pentacle, right there on his chest, and this sequence of numbers that seems totally random, 133221-1-185. And then there's this line that just makes you scratch your head. Oh, draconian devil. Oh, lame saint. P.S. Find Robert Langdon. Come on. That's not your everyday crime scene message, right?
And that mention of Langdon's name right there in the message, that's really important. It immediately puts Langdon, this respected academic, smack dab in the middle of this weird and very untraditional crime. And then right away, another key player enters the picture. Sophie Neveu.
Yeah, Sophie, she's a cryptographer. She works for the DCPJ, that's like the French FBI. And get this, she's Saunière's granddaughter. She's the one who figures out that this strange message might be meant for her.
It's really interesting because she's not just good at codes and puzzles randomly. It's like this skill comes directly from her relationship with her grandfather.
Totally. So the police, they're focused on these surface-level clues, right? But Sophie, she's already a step ahead. She sees that scrambled number sequence and she knows it means something. And guess what? Those seemingly random numbers, they're not random at all.
Right. She recognizes them as the Fibonacci sequence. That mathematical pattern where each number is the sum of the two before it. It's a sequence that shows up all over the place, like in nature, in art, even in architecture. It's everywhere. The fact that Saunière used this, well, it wasn't just random. It was like a clue, like a breadcrumb for Sophie.
It's like he knew she would understand, right?
Yeah. It makes you think, right? Like, what other hidden patterns are all around us? Maybe there are messages and meanings that we just haven't learned to see yet.
Totally. And then there's that P.S. at the end of the message. That wasn't just an afterthought, For Sophie, it brought back this very specific childhood memory. Her grandfather used to call her Princess Sophie. So those two little letters, they suddenly become really important.
They're not just an initialism, they're a connection to her past, her grandfather.
Exactly. And then there are those word puzzles, the anagrams. Oh, draconian devil. That's not just random gibberish. It turns out you can rearrange those letters to spell Leonardo da Vinci.
And then, oh, lame saint, that one becomes the Mona Lisa.
It's like Saunière set up this whole treasure hunt right there in the Louvre, guiding Sophie towards specific works of art. Talk about a family message with some serious global implications. But Langdon, our symbol expert, he also picks up on some crucial clues at the crime scene, right?
He does. He sees that fleur-de-lis symbol, the one associated with French royalty, combined with those PS initials, and it clicks for him. He knows the fleur-de-lis is also a key symbol for a specific secret society, and he starts to think maybe Jacques Saunière was a member of this, ancient and super-secret group.
Which leads us to the legendary Priory of Sion, a real European secret society. The book says it was founded way back in 1099. And get this, it claims some pretty famous members: Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Victor Hugo. They're supposedly named in these Les Dossiers Secrets parchments. It really makes you wonder, where does history end and fiction begin?
It's definitely blurry, for sure.
And then there's Langdon's own research. At the time of all this, he's working on this manuscript called Symbols of the Lost Sacred Feminine. It's about these unconventional interpretations of religious symbols. So it kind of makes you think maybe Saunier, with his fascination with hidden knowledge, maybe he knew about Langdon's work. Maybe he was interested in it.
It's possible. They both seem to be operating on a similar wavelength, looking beyond the surface, searching for hidden meaning.
And that pentacle symbol, the 5-pointed star on Saunier's chest, a lot of people associate that with dark occult stuff, but Langdon points out that in art history and symbology, it's also a well-known symbol of the female deity.
Which, again, ties into that theme of the sacred feminine that seems to be woven through this whole mystery.
Exactly. So you have Langdon and Sophie, right? They're working together, following these intellectual clues, these symbols and artistic connections. But there's this other force at play in the story, a much more intensely religious and, at least in this context, kind of antagonistic force, Opus Dei.
Yeah, Opus Dei. The book portrays them as this very devout Catholic sect, originally from Spain, known for their super traditionalist views. It talks about how fast they've grown, how much money they have, but it also doesn't shy away from all the controversy around them. The accusations of brainwashing, coercion, and even these practices like corporal mortification.
And that's where we meet Silas, an albino numerary of Opus Dei. He's shown as this incredibly devout guy who practices corporal mortification as a form of, penance. He gets his instructions via cell phone from this mysterious figure called the Teacher.
You immediately start to wonder, who is this teacher? What kind of power do they have, and what is their ultimate agenda?
For sure. Silas is a fascinating character, though, right? He's convinced he's doing God's work, protecting what he sees as the true message of Christ, even if it means using violence. It creates a really strong contrast with Langdon and Sophie's approach, which is all about intellectual exploration and figuring out these historical and artistic puzzles.
Yeah, it's like faith versus reason, action versus contemplation. But their paths converge in a big way when Sophie finds another clue that her grandfather left behind, this time hidden behind Da Vinci's painting Madonna of the Rocks. It's a key, a cruciform key, and it has the priory seal on it. At this point, it's pretty obvious that Saunier orchestrated this whole thing on purpose. He wanted Langdon involved, hence that message on his body. P.S. Find Robert Langdon.
And that's when the search for the legendary Holy Grail really kicks off. But the book, it kind of throws you a curveball right away because it challenges the traditional idea of what the Grail actually is.
It introduces the concept of sangreal, and then it explores the idea that sang might come from the word for blood, and real might mean royal. This immediately suggests a completely different interpretation of the Holy Grail, something way more significant and maybe even more controversial than just some religious object.
It makes you think, right? What's more powerful, a physical object or a legacy? What symbols hold the most weight for us?
Absolutely.
And then this really provocative idea starts to emerge. This idea that maybe the Holy Grail isn't an object at all, but a bloodline, the bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene.
Whoa.
I know, right? It's a bold theory that basically ignites the main conflict of the whole story and challenges centuries of established religious teachings. The book basically proposes that Jesus was married, which is, a huge deal.
No kidding. It definitely shakes things up.
So to learn more about this alternative history, Langdon suggests they reach out to Sir Lee Teabing. He's this wealthy British historian who's obsessed with the Holy Grail. He's even written a bunch of books about it. And he believes, just like Langdon, that the Grail is not a cup, but represents the bloodline of Jesus.
Teabing is like a walking encyclopedia of the Priory of Sion and their connection to the Knights Templar.
Yeah, he explains that the Templars were the Priory's military force. They were tasked with protecting these super important documents, the sangreal documents, the evidence of this hidden history.
And Teabing gets into how Emperor Constantine basically reshaped the Bible in the 4th century. He argues that Constantine purposely left out some Gospels, specifically the ones that showed Christ as a human being, with relationships and stuff. And instead, Constantine focused on Jesus' divine nature. The question is why? What was his motivation?
That's a great question.
Well, Teabing suggests that maybe Constantine did it to consolidate the power of the early church, to suppress any story that could challenge their authority. Stories like, Jesus being married and having descendants. This makes you think about how history is written, who gets to tell the story, and what might be left out.
Exactly. It's like, what if there are other versions of history out there just waiting to be uncovered?
So through Teabing's
Explanations and his take on history, the big conspiracy of the Da Vinci Code becomes clear. The idea that the church has been covering up this huge secret, that Jesus was married, and not just to anyone, but to Mary Magdalene. This secret, well, it's what the Priory of Sion is supposedly dedicated to protecting. And it's a secret that could completely change the way we understand Christianity.
Wow. And then we get to another really cool element in this story, the cryptex.
Oh yeah, the cryptex. Tell us about that.
So this is described as an invention by Da Vinci. It's like a portable vault for protecting secret messages. It uses a combination lock with rotating dials and letters. And wouldn't you know it, Sophie just happens to have a cryptex that was made by her grandfather. They think this cryptex is the keystone. It's the key to unlocking the secrets of the Holy Grail and the truth about Jesus' bloodline.
It's not just some ordinary puzzle box, though. The cryptex has this ingenious security measure built into it. Inside, along with the papyrus scroll that has the message, there's a vial of vinegar. If anyone tries to force the cryptex open, the vial will break and the vinegar will dissolve the papyrus, destroying the message forever. Talk about high stakes.
It really raises the stakes. And to add to the intrigue, the password to open this cryptex. It's hidden in a riddle, a cryptic poem that talks about a knight buried by a pope in London. This sends Langdon and Sophie on a whole new adventure.
From Paris to London, they're following the trail of clues, trying to unravel this mystery.
And the chase gets even more complicated when they arrive at Sir Lee Teabing's estate, Chateau Villette. They think they're safe, that they can trust him, but then betrayal.
That's right. Remy, Teabing's loyal manservant, well, he turns out to be working for the mysterious teacher. All of a sudden, Langdon and Sophie can't be sure who to trust.
And in a huge plot twist, the teacher, the person behind everything, is revealed to be Sir Lee Teabing himself. He was the mastermind the whole time, manipulating Silas and everyone else to find the Holy Grail for himself. It's kind of a cautionary tale, right? Like, what happens when the desire for knowledge becomes an obsession?
It really makes you think. So now Langdon and Sophie, they have to figure things out on their own. They're in London, and they have that riddle about the knight buried by a pope. And it leads them to the Temple Church. It's a historical church with ties to the Knights Templar, and it has tombs of knights from centuries past.
They're looking for a specific tomb, the one mentioned in the riddle, a tomb that should have an orb on it but is missing one.
It's a tiny detail, but in this story, even the smallest things can have huge meaning.
And the solution to the riddle, the password to the second cryptex, is Apiel. It turns out to be a reference to Sir Isaac Newton, the famous scientist. He's buried at Westminster Abbey in London. And while a pope didn't actually bury him, his scientific discoveries really challenged the church's teachings, so the riddle cleverly plays on that.
Very clever. And what's inside this second cryptex?
A map. It points to Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a place full of mysteries and legend and symbolism of its own.
So off they go to Scotland.
And at Rosslyn Chapel, the final truth of the Da Vinci Code is revealed. Sophie meets an old woman, and in a shocking turn of events, it turns out to be her grandmother. And even more incredible, this woman is a direct descendant of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. The real mission of the Priory of Sion. It wasn't to protect a cup, it was to protect this bloodline.
The real Holy Grail.
Exactly. The Sangreal is not a physical object, but a lineage, a family. And that tomb adorned with master's art from a poem. That's Rosslyn Chapel itself, a beautiful place filled with intricate carvings, a monument to centuries of hidden history.
Wow, what a story. So this deep dive into the Da Vinci Code, it's really a deep dive into these fascinating ideas. The book speculates that Jesus was married and that his bloodline has been secretly protected for centuries. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about history.
Right, and it makes you wonder about all the other secrets that might be out there. Maybe there are other truths that have been hidden from us, or maybe even lost completely. It's pretty mind-blowing.
It really is. So if this exploration of the Da Vinci Code has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to check out the All Sorts podcast on YouTube. We have a whole bunch of other deep dives waiting for you.
Yeah, there's a ton of fascinating stuff there. We explore all sorts of topics, and we're always adding more.
Hit that like button, share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new deep dives. And don't forget, you can also find the All Sorts podcast on X, Instagram, and Threads. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. Keep those minds curious, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.